the Divorced Girls Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to tell you about two Divorced Girl Smiling trusted professionals who I think are absolutely wonderful. The first is Vestor Capital. My financial advisors are Elaine Moss and Pete Mullins, who is a CDFA, and they are a team of advisors who help women in transition, meaning before, during, or after divorce. I have been a client of Vestor since 2016, I believe, and I truly have experienced such wonderful service and an amazing performance. If you want to learn more, you can find Elaine and Pete in the Trusted Professionals section of Divorced Girl Smiling or at vestorcapital.com. I also want to tell you about a really good real estate agent if you live in the Atlanta area. Her name is Holly Norman. She's a realtor, has been a realtor since 2003, but Holly is also a certified divorce real estate expert. So she specializes in helping people during and after divorce, sell their home, buy a home, find a rental. Holly is wonderful and very committed to the divorce space. If you want to learn more about Holly, you can find her at Chris Alex Real Estate Group, which is chrisalexrealestate.com, or in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. So if you're listening to this, have you ever in the past had an argument with your husband or soon-to-be ex-spouse and said, you know what? Maybe we should get divorced. Let's just get divorced. This isn't working out. All we do is argue. Once you bring up the word divorce, it can be a very dangerous threat to your relationship, and it can totally backfire on you. And that's what I want to talk about today. My guest is divorce mediator Michael Cohen. Michael is the founder of Michael's Mediation. He also went through a very litigious divorce, and he wrote an article for Divorce Girl Smiling called What Can Happen When Someone is Threatening Divorce. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Jackie. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for writing the article because it was a really, really good one. Now, people listening are probably thinking, well, I'm already separated. I already said that. How is this going to help me? And why don't you answer that question?
Well, it may not. Hopefully, the people watching this podcast are people who are considering divorce and thinking about it. Because you're right. If you've already started down the path, you're likely on that path now.
Okay, but what I do want to say is to people who aren't on the path yet, if you've already said it once, that's okay. We're just saying don't keep saying that when you're arguing. Don't just continually say it every time you have an argument. And I guess what you're going to say, Michael, is unless you really mean it, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's like dropping an atomic bomb. It's a terrible thing to threaten because um you're not giving the respect to the relationship to work it through. And I know this is hard to do, but once you pull out the word divorce, if your spouse isn't thinking about it, now they're thinking about it. And I just want to put a disclaimer. I'm not talking about this from prior experience. This is from experience working with couples that I've worked with, because I always start with making sure they both are committed to divorce. And sometimes they're not. And when they start down this path, it's really hard to rewind from it. As soon as you mention that word, sometimes your spouse is thinking, wow, I never thought about it, but maybe I should start getting a lawyer and thinking about what my rights are. Or they might think, boy, I thought we were just weathering the storm. She or he is out of this marriage. Maybe I should think about it. So if you don't mean it, don't say it. Don't use it as a threat.
Okay, so you said that once a couple starts down the path of divorce, dynamics change And then I think both people's defenses go up. Like they hear that D word, divorce, their defenses go up, and all of a sudden now there's no trust. There's a complete breakdown. Then you're thinking to yourself, hmm, has she already gotten a lawyer? Has she already talked to someone? Is she maybe hiding money? Is she getting paperwork ready and is going to spring this on me? So then your chances of even working out the marriage go drastically down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what it does is it causes when that word comes up, you stop confiding in each other to work things out and understand each other. And there's a natural tendency with people to go seek advice and guidance. Certainly, if your spouse tells you, I think we should get a divorce, you're going to potentially talk to a friend, a coworker who went through it. You might reach out to a lawyer. You might mention it to your family. God forbid you mention it to your kids, but word gets out. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of momentum on people telling you things who aren't really informed of your situation. In my opinion, if you're considering divorce, this is best case, right? Not all couples can do this. Is talk to your spouse about it. Like say, hey, I'm not happy. What are our options? Because divorce sets you off to opposite corners. A
Right.
conversation could pull you into a discussion. And I think if you've been married, you've been in love, you've been in a relationship, you might have a family that deserves the respect to talk it through together.
And I will speak from personal experience. The most bizarre part of my whole divorce was, I mean, and we had problems for years, but the most bizarre was that when we finally decided that we were gonna get divorced, it was like we went from being a couple to the next day, 2 boxers in a ring. And it was just a bizarre, cold, weird feeling that you could go from being so close and like, "Okay, we're a team, we're gonna try to work this out," to now the battle starts. And that was a terrible feeling, and probably we could have handled it a lot better.
Right. And this doesn't change, not to talk about either of our situations, it doesn't change the fact that some divorces are amicable and some are litigious. But you owe it to yourselves to at least um, discuss the options, talk about whether you want to work on the relationship, and make a decision together if you want to divorce. Um, if you are going to use the word divorce as a threat to get somebody to change, it's not going to work. It's going to lead to unintended consequences that you may not be ready for.
Okay, let's talk about that. So, I do think there are a lot of people who will just say, "Well, you know what? Then let's get divorced," because then they think their husband or wife is gonna freak out and change the behavior and say, "No, please don't." But you know what? I think that a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, okay, you want a divorce? Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I do too." And then the other person really didn't mean it, and then they're like, "Now what do I do?" So they
Right.
just opened up the can of worms.
Yeah. Who's going to blink first? Well, if you're not blinking, let's keep going. And before you know it, you're going down a very dangerous path. A lot of people don't fully understand. A lot of this stuff is basic to people who work in the divorce industry. Like we know what the impact of divorce is, but a lot of couples think divorce is the solution. The number one thing I'm going to tell you is they say marriages and relationships take work. Divorces with children take work. So whether you are divorced or married, you still have to learn how to work together for your children. So regardless, you're not getting past the issues that you're having. But on another level, when you go down the divorce path, there's a lot of implications that people don't think about. You know, finances, budget, where am I going to live? How much is my health insurance going to cost me? What's going to happen to the relationships I've built with my spouse's partner? What about our friends that we share? What's going to happen? Your whole social world is turned upside down. And a lot of this people understand, but until you go through it, sometimes it's a shock to understand that your whole life is turned upside down. And it's okay to say, I'm not happy, we need to change something. But if you don't want to get a divorce, don't threaten it because you might end up walking down that path and all of a sudden your entire foundation is just shaken.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Today, I'm here with divorce mediator Michael Cohen, and Michael and I are talking about what can happen when someone is threatening divorce. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about if a couple proceeds with a divorce without making a genuine effort to repair the marriage, they will find that the consequences are more impactful than they might have assumed. And we have so many examples. And we're also going to talk about why relationships are hard, the work they take, and maybe get into some more detail of relationships during, after the divorce and what that entails, since Michael and I are both divorced. We'll be right back. Darlene Taylor believes that if we are the same person on this date next year as we are today, then we have wasted a year. I just love that. Darlene is a divorced mom and a health, wellness, life, and parenting coach. And Darlene feels that we are always growing and changing, and that's a good thing. I feel like Darlene's energy is contagious. She is such a positive person, and I love knowing her. If you are looking for a wellness, life, or parenting coach during or after divorce, you can get in touch with Darlene. You can find her at darlenetaylor.com or in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. I also want to talk about a wonderful mortgage lender named Tracy Flanagan, who's a vice president and a mortgage loan officer for Green State Mortgage. Tracy has been a mortgage lender for, a couple decades. So if you have to refinance your home to keep the home in the divorce, or you are purchasing a new home, I would highly recommend Tracy. She's so experienced, wonderful person. You can find her at Green State Mortgage. You can also find her in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. What can happen when someone is threatening divorce? That's what we're talking about today. And my guest is divorce mediator Michael Cohen. Michael is the founder of Michael's Mediation. Michael's mediation practice has a niche in parenting plans. I love, love, love this about Michael. And I want to tell a little story about you, Michael, to my listeners in case they want to work with you. Michael went through a litigious divorce several years ago, and he said it impacted his kids, and was his motivation to become a divorce mediator. So Michael was a successful business person. He doesn't have to work anymore. He decided to do this out of the love of helping people have better co-parenting relationships during and after divorce. So is that kind of accurate? Anything you want to add?
No, it is a passion project of mine. I've I want to help couples get through this where their kids are healthy and where they're healthy and the family unit is still in a good place. So that's why I'm doing this.
Good. Okay. Let's move on to the consequences and the impact it has if you don't really work on your marriage before you get divorced. But I think there's a lot of people listening to this who are like, you know what, too late. It's that ship has sailed. But I want to talk about having a relationship during and after divorce the best you possibly can. And that's why this is important for everyone, not just people who are thinking about divorce. All right. So you said that your children are going to assume the worst, and without proper guidance from a mediated process are more likely to suffer more and be negatively impacted by the divorce.
Yeah, the it's normal human nature for people to, if they don't have all the facts, to assume the worst. So, just think of yourself in any situation when there's uncertainty, you always worry and think about the worst that could happen. With children, that's terrible because they probably are exposed to other friends of theirs who have went through a divorce, and most not most, many divorces are contentious and not very favorable for the kids. And they probably have experiences where their friends have gone through this, and they're going to assume that that's what they're going to go through. So when you just spring this on your spouse and you threaten this and you haven't thought it through, and then word gets out and if your kids find out about it, they're going to assume the worst. They're going to assume it's going to be a nasty divorce. They're going to assume their life is going to be upended. They're going to assume they're not going to be living in the same home. They're going to assume their friends are going to change, and they're going to be scared and anxious and everything. If you are going through this with children, you really, really, really have to think about doing this in a better and a healthier way. And I'm not just saying mediation. If you need to litigate, that's fine, but just try to get on the same page with your spouse. Try to work on your marriage before you threaten something just to get a response.
Okay, the other thing about the children is once they start assuming all these things, their schoolwork could suffer, their social life could suffer. They might do start hanging around bad people, low self-esteem. So what you're doing now, I want to tell my listeners, is impacting your kids' future. So I know you are listening to this and you cannot stand your spouse. That's why you turned on the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast, because you want out and you don't know how to get there and you're looking for information, and that's fine. I'm sure there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment. You're like, I'd rather have all these things than be married to him anymore. We both understand that because Michael has so many clients that tell him that every day. But we just want you to think about all of the consequences involved and then make decisions based on making sure those consequences, those consequences, and not really consequences, even just how your life's going to be. Like another one, Michael, you listed is you may have to pay spousal support. I was on the phone on one of my DGS consults the other day, and this woman was like, my husband has stayed home my entire career. I have been at the office every day for 16 years, and my husband has never had a job. Their kids are in high school. I mean, what does the guy do all day? And now she has to pay child support, alimony to this guy, maybe for the rest of his life. How would you feel if that was you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. I feel bad for couples that go through the divorce process not understanding that, because hopefully they've done some research and talked to people before they go down that path, because that changes everybody's budget.
Mhm. Okay, another thing that might happen is your divorce is gonna take time. Your divorce could take years if you're litigating. It could even if you're mediating, it could take months, and all of your priorities are gonna be solely focused on your divorce and things you need to do for the divorce and the meetings and the talks with your lawyers and the attorney's fees. So just we're not telling you not to get divorced. We're telling you to make sure you really want it, knowing all the facts.
Yeah, sometimes if you're just threatening divorce, you might, in hindsight, think, boy, it would have been a lot easier if I just talked to my spouse and we figured out a way to work this out. Because you're right, when you're going through a divorce, the only thing that matters is the fight that's going on, and it's not always a fight, but it's always a strategic conversation. And your work, your friends, everything else is secondary, and it's just a very stressful process that you can get yourself into.
I have talked to women, several over the years, who have told me I should have tried to make my marriage work. This didn't work out the way I wanted to. I was just so angry and I didn't know that this was going to be my life. And I felt at the time divorce was a better decision, and they realized they were wrong. Now, I would say the majority is glad they got divorced. Don't you think, Michael? Like it was something that they realized was the right decision. But there are people who have said to me, I should have stayed married. And it's a lot easier. And we're not telling people that you shouldn't be happy and live a happy life. I always say I'm not a fan of divorce. I'm a fan of happiness. So, whatever that means, like whether that means trying to work your marriage out or getting divorced, you need to live a happy, healthy life and make the best decision based on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think it's important for people to work on your marriage first. I think it's important to have a conversation with your spouse. I think it's important to address what's going on. And if you haven't gone to marriage counseling, if you haven't tried discernment counseling, if you haven't really put the work in together, and sometimes it doesn't work right away. I talked to many couples who have tried marriage counseling several times. The first therapist counselor wasn't good. They tried somebody else. By the third one, they found somebody. You have to find the right fit, but you have to at least try. So couples that come to me, I always ask them, "Are you sure you both want this? And have you tried marriage counseling?" "No, we haven't." Well, to me, that's a shame because especially when you have children, um, life is interesting, right? Like you might not be happy, but there's so much wealth in being together and being happy together and having a family unit for your children, which is really important if you could fix the marriage. If it's beyond fixing, it's healthy to go through that process as well, so you both get to the same page and you could look at each other and say, "We were in love at one point, but it's just not working. We both agree. Let's just move forward." So there's value in going through it in a thoughtful way, so you're both on the same page and you could still commit to being good co-parents. So, um, I'm disappointed sometimes when couples make this decision without putting the work in.
Okay, I have a couple things to comment on about what you just said. The first one is if people are listening and there's any kind of abuse going on, or like alcoholism or drug abuse or emotional abuse towards you or physical abuse, that's not what we're talking about. That those are situations that probably you need to leave. No, not probably. 100% you're doing the right thing. Okay, we're not gonna try to talk somebody into staying in a bad marriage that is abusive and unhealthy for you. Second thing is, if you're listening to this, it's never too late to try to say, "Hey, let's pause our divorce and see if we really want to repair the marriage." And Michael is nodding yes, and I love that you're doing this, Michael, because he's a mediator. He's not gonna make money if you get back together, and he still wants people to try to work it out if they can. So, if you're listening to this and you're 6 months into the divorce and you're in mediation, it's never too late to say to your spouse, "Listen, maybe we should put everything on hold and truly try to find the right therapist this time and commit to trying to make this work." Now that's if there's no real deal breakers, like I said, like the drinking or the abuse or the constant cheating or whatever it is. But if you think you might be able to work it out, it doesn't matter if your divorce is even close to being finalized. You can still do it. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and it's much more likely in a mediated session or a mediating process than a litigated session. When you litigate through an attorney-led process, you've each paid retainers, you've each paid several thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. It's hard to walk away from that. Most mediators that I know personally want good outcomes, and we are very supportive of pausing and trying to find the best outcome. So you can absolutely do that. I often check in with my clients because certain topics are very emotional. The first one I find is just the holiday schedule when they realize they're not going to see their kids on key holidays. Um, and people, I've seen tears and emotions, and I warn them up front. We're going to start to have some heavier discussions, and just afterwards say, "Hey, if you're feeling differently now, let me know. We could pause this. You could give this some time to think about because this is very real and you're not obligated to keep going."
I just love that advice. I think it's so great. And I think that now I'm not a therapist, but I have a great idea for people listening. Get a pen and a paper, start making lists. What are the reasons you want to get divorced? Get really specific. Like, my husband's a slob. My husband, never helps out with the baby. Whatever the issues are, okay? Now if you're putting my husband beat me up, that's a different thing. Then write down all the things you are gonna have to face when you're getting divorced. Well, I'm gonna have to move. I'm gonna have to go back to work. And if you see it all on paper, you'll be able to decide, is it worth it to try to work it out? What do you think about that idea?
I think it's fantastic. These are life-changing decisions. To make it on the spur of the moment as a threat is not going to work. You're never going to make a good decision that way. You have to think about it. You have to sleep on it. You have to give it some thought, and you have to talk to each other because your spouse might not be willing to work on it. And then you have your answer, but you really owe it to the relationship to talk through it and see if there's an opportunity for you both to try to make it better. And seeing it on paper is good. Having a close friend to talk to is helpful, maybe not always helpful because they're going to generally be supportive of you and kind of echo whatever you're saying generally, unless you have a really good friend who's being honest with you. But yeah, I think you have to take the time to evaluate it.
Okay, another thing I wanted to tell people is forget your pride. Okay, that has to go out the door. And if you feel like you made a mistake saying, let's get divorced, go back to your spouse, forget your pride, just suck it up and say, I think I made a mistake. It's okay to be vulnerable like that. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it
Like, who cares, right? About
well,
your pride.
the worst case is they're going to say, nope, too late, but at least you'll know you gave it a try. And the best case, if they have similar, it's only going to work if you both have similar feelings. And if they have similar feelings, they're going to say, I'm so glad you said that, or you know what, let's talk about that. So at least you've given yourself that chance. Don't,
Right. Or they might say, nope, too late because they're mad. And then a week later, they might say, I've thought about it and okay, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to do this. And you know what? You might want to say, well, no, now it's too late for me, and play this game. But forget pride and all that because the stakes are way too high to have pride get in the way of anything.
right. I mean, you used a phrase earlier that I use a lot too, like I'm a divorce mediator, but I'm not a fan of divorce, especially when children's aren't involved. So I'm not trying to say you shouldn't get divorced. Just be thoughtful about it and try to do it the right way. Um, a comment I made earlier, I'm going to want to bring up again is when I go through my divorce mediation sessions with my clients, I am asking them countless times to make commitments to each other as to their parenting plan. And it comes with respect to all different aspects of the parenting. And I tell them, I said, this is very awkward because you guys are getting a divorce, but I'm asking you to make commitments to each other about how you're going to raise your children. So it never goes away. So if you're planning on just slamming the door and insulting somebody and threatening and walking away, guess what? If you want joint legal custody, you're going to have to talk to that person and make decisions again. So you're just putting wedges in the rest of your life as co-parents. So it's just, marriages are hard and being co-parents is hard. It takes work. So unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, you need to find a way to work together on an amicable way for the children. So, by threatening, you're just making it harder for yourself later. So try to find the
I
right path.
totally agree, and people also think when the kids turn 18 and or after they graduate from college, I never have to talk to them again. No, you do, because I'm at that point. There are things that happen when they're young adults. God forbid they get sick or something, or how about they're getting married? There's always gonna be something, or maybe one of your kids is in a bad place. How much better is it if the 2 of you can talk as a team and say, okay, how are we going to help our daughter? She needs this. She's in a bad place. Instead of like, nope, I'm not talking to him. I'm not talking to her. And then trying to help your daughter when you're parallel parenting and not coming together as a team to support her.
Right. Who's the adult in the room at that point, the child or the adults? I hate to say it that way, but you really have to look at your responsibility as parents. You've committed to joint legal custody. You have to put your heads together and do what's right for your kids.
Love it. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. We thought we were going to be out of time. Thought we weren't, we were like, oh, we don't know. This is going to be a short podcast. Meanwhile, we went over. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Appreciate it always.
And if you're listening and you want to talk to Michael and have a consult with him, you can find him at michaelsmediation.com. divorcedgirlsmiling.com. You can also find Michael in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling, which is divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.